The most influential talk radio voices of our time. Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Tony Katz, Dave Ramsey, and all things local with Lafayette Live. The voice of Greater Lafayette, The Patriot, 104.3 FM.
Z96.5 WAZY is your home for Purdue football. Join us for Purdue Game Day 2 hours before the kickoff of every Purdue game. And then it's the Boilermaker Sports Network pregame show 1 hour before kick. Purdue football on Z96.5 WAZY.
People from all across the greater Lafayette area were asked what TV stations and shows they watched. And one group of TV stations came out on top. Star City Broadcasting, ABC 35, NBC 16, Fox 16, and Me My TV. We'd like to say thank you for making us number one in the greater Lafayette area. It makes us proud to say, this is home.
Tonight, it's the 2020 Candidate Forum for the Indiana House of Representatives District 13 race, presented by Star City Broadcasting and the League of Women Voters of Greater Lafayette.
Welcome to Campaign 2020. This is the race for State Representative District 13. During the next half hour, we'll be hearing from the Democratic candidate Loretta Barnes and Republican incumbent Sharon Nagel. We'll begin with Sharon Nagel, who won the virtual toss, so to speak, and we'll hear her remarks during a 2-minute opening statement.
Hello, everybody. I am your current state representative for the last 8 years. My current committee assignments are Ways and Means, Courts and Criminal Code. My leadership positions that I have earned at this point now are as the Chair of Ethics, Assistant Majority Whip. My background, my education is I have a BA in Business Administration and Finance from Western Michigan University and a master's from University of Houston in finance also. 14 years in corporate finance, 9 years as a clerk treasurer of the city of Attica, and 25 years as a small business owner. I currently employ between 20 to 30 employees based on the time of the year, since I have an ice cream business which is very seasonal. I am a mother of 2, son Doyle, daughter Jessica, 1 and 9/10 grandchildren. I have Owen and Violet will be born shortly. I'm waiting for that call. Pretty excited. I am a wife of 36 years. I have a vast amount of experience. I am 60 years old. I've had a wonderful opportunity to learn so much about our state and our budget and our government and policy. What was incredibly helpful for me to become a state representative was my 9 years as a clerk treasurer. It wasn't anything I actually thought on my own about being a state representative. But what happened over 9 years is I learned how much state government was affecting our city and our ability to grow and be a bigger city and a better city and run more efficiently. So with that information in mind, it really became obvious to me I could have a better impact at the state level. I have enjoyed my tenure there. I hope to continue doing it, and I appreciate everyone's support. Thank you.
Thank you. And opening remarks from Democrat Loretta Barnes.
Hi, my name is Loretta Barnes, and I'm here to talk about the next steps. It's been hard. Our country and our state have faced a challenging, unprecedented 6 months. We've handled some things well and some things not so great, but where do we go from here? I can tell you that I've seen resilience from Hoosiers over the past 6 months. When so many families face the uncertainty of job loss, of health insurance loss, and even loss of lives, I see time and time again people pulling together and helping each other. Whether it's donating to food banks or checking up on their neighbors, and it gives me hope. But as we talk tonight about re-energizing the economy and helping businesses grow again, we're at an opportune time to not revert back to how things were done the past 10 years. This pandemic has shown the vulnerabilities in our systems, in our healthcare systems, how our rural areas struggle with limited healthcare resources, as Indiana already ranks third worst state for maternal morbidity, our inadequate funding for public education made starkly apparent as we asked teachers to do more, being both teacher and IT assistant to struggling e-learning parents. I don't just want to see us go back to normal. We can do better. I want to see us invest in our public education because we recognize that it's an investment in our communities and in our futures. I want to see us invest in healthcare, making healthcare accessible and affordable no matter where you are in the state or how much money you make. Thank you.
Thank you. Our first question concerns funding for public education and for education in general. We'll begin with Loretta Barnes. How would you propose funding for schools, school vouchers, and teacher pay?
Well, one of the first things that I would do is I would put a pause on funding for vouchers. I would use public money for public education. Until there's not a public school building that doesn't have air conditioning, or a classroom doesn't have updated books, or a teacher doesn't have the pay that they deserve, then we can send additional money to charter schools and vouchers. I would take that money that we're diverting, the excess money, and put it towards public education, because to me, public education is the infrastructure, the foundation of our communities, and it's what everything in our community is based off of. So I would put public education first and teachers first.
Thank you. Sharon Nagel, what's your philosophy in terms of funding schools, education overall, teachers, and school vouchers?
So let's start at the top. At the 30,000-foot view, our state budget, 50% is K through 12 education. That's significant. That shows that the state is truly investing in K through 12. Can we do more? Absolutely. And I think most want to. What's important to understand that we've accomplished is that 94% of the funding goes to traditional public schools. 3.5% goes to charter schools, which are public. And only 2.5% goes to the voucher program. So it is a very insignificant amount in reality. What I would like to see is, of course, more dollars be able to funnel back to the classroom so that local schools are able to give the appropriate raises to teachers. Bottom line, the state does not set the salary schedule. Local school districts do. What we have problems with in our district is rural schools losing population.
Thank you. 30 seconds rebuttal, Loretta Barnes.
60% of the funding that goes to voucher programs goes to children, students who did not attend public schools. So that is an additional fiscal cost to the taxpayer on top of what they're already paying. If you can't afford to take care of public education, don't send money to private schools.
Thank you. 30 seconds rebuttal, Sharon Nagel.
So what's critical is understanding that we let the dollars follow the student. So a parent has the option, and that's something that's happened prior to me becoming a state representative. We fund students. We do not fund schools directly. So schools, the parent gets to control what school their child goes to. That's been the philosophy of our state and has been for quite a long time. Some parents that are dealing with schools that are not functioning correctly get to make that choice.
Thank you. Our second question, we will begin with Sharon Nagel, and it concerns the pandemic and revenue. What types of initiatives specifically would you support to help get the state financially back on track?
So right now, looking at the data, it does look pretty bad. We're looking at what our revenue sources are. We're looking at how the distribution is going to happen. I think the forecast that we'll receive in December is going to be quite eye-opening and helpful, so then we can then take a good look at how the distribution is going to occur. I know that all agencies have already been asked to put a freeze on hiring and a 15% reduction in their expenditures. I mean, we're going to have to tighten our belt somewhat, and we'll have to think hard how we're going to do that. Obviously, the CARES Act fund money that is available, I know the governor's looking at some different options on how to distribute that funding. Some of the most important things that we have to think about, though, is keeping people in their homes, keeping communities stable. So we'll look at programs that add that stability. That'll be the key, I believe.
Thank you. Loretta Barnes, what types of initiatives would you support to help the state get back on track financially after or during the pandemic?
One of the things I would do is to push to expand the workforce initiatives, particularly in low-income and rural areas. I would also look at primarily public health is the most important, and then making sure that critical industries have the resources that they need. And I would also look at supplementing federal funds at the state level, so small businesses that could not get small business loans with the original loan money can get money from states. And I would also like to see more initiatives like how Lafayette is doing with the Fresh Air Eats. Local areas taking initiative to come up with creative ways to help small businesses.
Sharon Nagel, 30 seconds follow-up.
And it's a wonderful idea, and what Loretta mentioned it actually occurred, and that has to
The initiative, go ahead.
Has to do with the $61 million that the governor actually put out there for small businesses that could not qualify for the small business loan, the payroll, the PPP program, and the EIDL, all the acronyms. If you didn't qualify for those, you were able to actually apply for this other program through the state. And actually, I had a bunch of different companies I went to and said, hey, you need to apply. So that's a great idea. That's one of those things that actually has happened.
Thank you both. In our third question, Indiana addresses the state's large surplus, and the state has prided itself on maintaining a large surplus. Is it raining now? What should Indiana's philosophy be with regard to freeing up some of that money to help people out or help the state out? Sharon Nagel.
No doubt that surplus will be utilized. All of it I couldn't say. That's kind of above my pay grade. There's a large group that looks at that to make that decision. The budget committee, the executive branch, but we'll all have comments about it. Currently, it's right around 11%. It's actually It's 11% of your revenue. It's 45 days of revenue to operate our state government. So it's not that huge of amount of money, actually. But the reality is that those funds are going to be helpful for us to weather this storm. No doubt about it. It's good that we actually had it, and it also kept us in a AAA credit rating, which actually trickles down to all local governments and helping them on their bonding. It's actually creates a very healthy environment for entire state and all local governments. So with that being said, no doubt that this will be looked at and most likely allocated in certain ways to lift up people.
Thank you. Loretta Barnes, should the state continue to preserve a large rainy day fund, or is it raining?
It's definitely raining. I mean, I'd always encourage saving money for a rainy day, but what I would have liked to have seen is an emergency session being called for the General Assembly and using some of that emergency fund when the federal money was tied up in Congress, going back and forth of whether anything would happen, and using some of that money for public schools ahead of time to make sure they have all of the masks and the hand sanitizers and everything they needed without all the uncertainty before school started. That's one area that I think we kind of dropped the ball with. And in addition, it just would have been good for parents who were scared for their children to know that Indiana was watching out for them.
Thank you. Sharon Nagel.
So there may have been some delays on getting all of the protection equipment out to the schools. But the reality is the schools are going to be fully funded. They're going to receive all of the funds that we had budgeted. That was guaranteed. We had the Federal CARES Act. So we had those dollars to utilize. And what's most important to remember is that if you would have called a special session, we could not have controlled all the subjects that were discussed, and it could have turned into quite a fiasco on trying to actually get anything accomplished. The reality is it's cost the taxpayers for all of us to go back into session.
Thank you. Loretta Barnes, 30 seconds to follow up.
But at least the subject of public education and small business would have come up before school started. Schools are getting money now, but I've seen teacher after teacher scrambling to get hand sanitizer, to get masks for the children, to get the lanyards, trying to figure out if they're going to keep their job or if they're going to quit because they have some pre-existing condition that makes them susceptible to COVID.
Thank you. Sharon Nagel, 30 seconds to follow up.
So obviously the protection is incredibly important, and I know that many schools initially were struggling on getting all of the equipment that they needed. I feel confident now that all the schools are in good shape. I know that they scrambled at the executive branch to make sure that the distribution was fair and moved quickly. Were we perfect? We've never been through a pandemic before to this magnitude. So I have to say that I'm very proud of how fast everybody collectively worked at this. I mean, some schools delayed opening.
Thank you. Our next question concerns the environment and climate change. Sharon Nagel, we'll begin with you. What type of initiative could you specifically support that would address some of those concerns about the environment?
So it's well known for most people that I am very much a proponent of renewable energy. Our district is full of renewable energy, and it's just expanding and expanding, which is fabulous, I believe. But local government has to have a say in it too, and that's always the struggle when a new wind farm wants to come in or a new solar farm. So those are discussions that we're having. I don't think the state should be in a strong arm position on that. I think that local government should still have a say on placement and ordinances and separation between households, etc. But what's really important is that there is a tremendous demand now for more renewable energy. More and more companies want they want to go to carbon neutral. They also have initiatives of course, zero landfill. SIA is a famous one in here that we all know about. So I'm very proud to see this transition occurring. And I know of several new projects happening in our district that I'm very excited about.
Loretta Barnes, what types of initiatives concerning climate change and the environment would you support?
Along with renewable resources, so I'm very glad that Sharon supports that. I would support many different areas. With windmills, I would support, like Sharon said, local people being okay with windmills coming into their area. But on top of that, I would also support if there are windmills in your area that the energy that gets saved, the people of that area benefit from it, not some people from far, not just people from far away benefit from the energy that is saved. The other thing that I would want to see is the coal ash pits that are unlined in Indiana get fixed. I would like to see an overhaul of our water treatment systems to make sure that the water is good.
Thank you. Sharon Nagel, 30 seconds to follow up.
So I would have to just say that, you know, there's a big shift occurring right now on all the utility companies. I think it was NIPSCO that announced that wanted to go 100% renewable. I know there are several coal plants that they're filing with the IURC to shut them down. There's a bit of a struggle because that does take away jobs in the southern area of Indiana. But those people can be retrained and taken into a different industry. We passed legislation to help in that area. So we've got some work to do, but we're on our way.
Loretta Barnes.
I don't think it can happen fast enough. I'm glad that Indiana's supporting that. I would like to see a lot more initiatives that are based around making sure that children are healthy, making sure the water is good to drink, making sure that you don't get cancer from living near corporations or businesses that are not following regulations.
Thank you. Gun violence is on some voters' mind, and so our next question will begin with Loretta Barnes. What types of initiatives would you propose or support to address those concerns about gun violence?
Where I support common sense gun laws, so I support a national database, background checks. I support what we already have is the red flag laws. I support, I actually support requiring people to lock up their weapons. Basically, to me, if you can save a life, that's the most important thing. That you respect people's freedoms, you respect the Second Amendment, but you also have to have sense about why you have that freedom.
Thank you. Sharon Nagel, what specific proposals could you support to address concerns about gun violence?
Sure. So I think you have to look at the root of gun violence. The root typically involves drugs and territories, and that type of violence is incredibly upsetting. And we need to really deal with those societal issues, I believe, more than taking people's guns away. I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment. I'm a supporter of making sure that there's appropriate background checks. I very much support on having to go through the permit process. I know that there's some legislators that have pushed hard to eliminate that. I think that's unreasonable. I think it's very reasonable to have a permitting process. So again, I think that's more societal issues that we have to address rather than the guns themselves.
Thank you. Loretta Barnes, 30 seconds to follow up.
I also support banning large magazines and assault weapons, semi-assault weapons, like AK-47s. Am I saying the right thing? I'm sorry. I apologize. And that's it.
Sharon Nagel.
Again, I just feel very strongly about addressing the societal issues and dealing with recidivism, which is a very big issue. We've got to get our handle on why we have such terrible recidivism rates, and a lot of gun violence is involved in that. So that's an area we need to work on.
Our next question concerns voter concerns about integrity of elections and fairness. We'll begin with Sharon Nagel. What specifically should the state be doing to address concerns about election security and fairness?
So we've made a big investment in our voting machines and the integrity behind the system. I'm not aware of any county that is struggling with security issues. Yeah, obviously there's a big discussion right now on the mail-in voting, but I found quite interesting is that there is 11 reasons for an absentee ballot, and when you read those 11 reasons, you realize very quickly that there's a lot of reasons that someone can choose if they really want to do an absentee ballot. So I just don't see how if somebody's fearful of going to the ballot because of COVID, that they can't see a reason on that ballot that would work for them to get an absentee ballot.
Loretta Barnes, how would you address concerns about election integrity and fairness?
One of the big concerns is voter suppression. That is one of the big hindrances to making sure elections are fair. To me, voting is a right, and voter registration should be automatic at the age of 18. And if it can't be automatic, then we should have same-day voter registration, not a cutoff date of 30 days ahead of time. We should make sure that there are voting locations, enough voting locations in all areas. If you remember the last election, there were issues in Marion Lincoln County because of not having enough voting locations, and especially now because of COVID. That's all. My time's running.
Right, thank you. We have to leave it there. We will move to closing statements, excuse me. So Loretta Barnes, we will begin with your closing remarks.
Okay, well, I appreciate everybody taking the time to listen to us, and everybody hosting the event, and Sharon for coming and talking about these important issues. Even if I stumble over a word or a phrase, just know that if I'm elected, that public education will be number one priority for me, making sure teachers have the resources that they need, making sure people in rural areas and in low-income areas are not forgotten. If you want to find out more about me, you can go to my website at LorettaBarnes4Indiana.com, and I would appreciate your vote, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. And Sharon Nagel.
I'm very proud to serve as your state representative, and I hope to continue addressing the constituent issues and issues around the state of Indiana. When you're 1 out of 100 in a house, you sometimes feel like you're only one voice. But the reality is that you have to work hard to get a collective effort going, and I'm your person to do that. I am very strong supporter of a structurally balanced budget. I support our education system. I know the dollars that we keep putting in towards K through 12 need to get better distributed to the classroom. We've made sure that we've passed legislation to help that occur. It really comes down to the local level and making sure that they distribute it properly. I don't think anybody wants the state to do an actual salary schedule. I think that should be controlled locally. So I will promote funding these programs, and I will be there to lift up citizens, state of Indiana. Thank you.
Thank you. We want to thank all of the candidates for participating, and to viewers, we're hoping that you find these forums informative so that you can cast an informed ballot. The deadline to register to vote is October 5th. Early voting starts October 6th, and the election day is November 3rd. You can follow Star City Broadcasting for more information about candidates, and also check the League of Women Voters, vote411.org. Have a good evening.
The 2020 Candidate Forum for the Indiana House of Representatives District 13 race was presented by Star City Broadcasting and the League of Women Voters of Greater Lafayette. Thank you for watching.
The most influential talk radio voices of our time. Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Tony Katz, Dave Ramsey, and all things local with Lafayette Live. The voice of Greater Lafayette, The Patriot, 104.3 FM.
Z96.5 WAZY is your home for Purdue football. Join us for Purdue Game Day 2 hours before the kickoff of every Purdue game. And then it's the Boilermaker Sports Network pregame show 1 hour before kick. Purdue football on Z96.5 WAZY.
People from all across the greater Lafayette area were asked what TV stations and shows they watched. And one group of TV stations came out on top: Star City Broadcasting, ABC 35, NBC 16, Fox 16, and Me My TV. We'd like to say thank you for making us #1 in the greater Lafayette area. It makes us proud to say, this is home.
Tonight, it's the 2020 Candidate Forum for the Indiana House of Representatives District 25 race, presented by Star City Broadcasting and the League of Women Voters of Greater Lafayette.
Welcome to Campaign 2020, the race for state representative in District 25. I'm your moderator, Chris Morisi-Vitsa. In the next half hour, we'll be hearing from Democratic challenger Alex Sabol and Republican incumbent Don Leahy about the issues that are facing constituents and the legislature at large in Indiana. And first, we'll go to Representative Don Leahy. He won the virtual coin toss, so to speak, and we will have 2-minute opening statements from each candidate.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. As you say, my name is Don Leahy. First of all, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for the opportunity to have this forum and to have this discussion. I think it's very important for constituents to be informed when they go to the polls here in a few weeks. So I very much appreciate that opportunity. As I say, Don Leahy, I'm from Brookston, live farm and work in Brookston currently. Born and raised there, actually born in Lafayette and raised all my life in the Brookston area, so have close ties to the community. Went to Purdue University, graduated in secondary education, had an opportunity to teach school for a few years, enjoyed that very much, but also had the opportunity to go back to the family business, so my wife and I did that several years ago. So I've been there ever since and enjoy that very much also. In the legislature, I've served there, and fortunately, I enjoy serving in the legislature on the committees that I am involved with. Is where most of the issues that I work with are in the Ag and Rural Development Committee. I serve as chairman of that committee, serve on the Public Health Committee, and also the Environmental Affairs Committee. So the issues that come up in those committees, I work strongly to do the best that I can do representing my constituents in District 25, and I work very closely with those, trying to communicate back and forth both on issues and policies that we'll be looking at, and I hope to return to the legislature and continue that work in the future.
Thank you. And now we'll hear a 2-minute opening statement from Democrat Alex Sabol.
For those of you I haven't met, my name is Alex Sabol. I'm the 4th generation of my family to live in this area, and I received a great public education from the state of Indiana and built a great career out of it. I chose with my wife to move back to this town, to this area, to come here to build a home and also to make a difference in this community. You know, we've seen in Indiana, though, that this area and our state isn't the same one of my youth. We've seen over 500,000 people in our state go without insurance and health care that they need or that they can afford. We've seen teachers working 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet and declining graduation rates. We've seen Indiana be the 4th worst polluted state in the country. And we've seen KKK flyers drops 5 minutes from my own home. And I'm running because I'm choosing to do something about it. These are unsettling times for our state and our nation. And Indiana needs new, bold leadership to move our great state forward. I'm committed to a new vision for Indiana, a vision where Indiana is a leader in providing affordable, accessible health care to everyone in our state, where Indiana has the top education system for pre-K through 12 and beyond, and where Indiana has the best communities for living and working. And that's the Indiana that I'm fighting for. And together, I look forward to using my energy and my drive to help make our great state even better. And I appreciate the opportunity to be with you tonight. And even though we're not in person, if you have more questions for me, you can always reach me at our website, alexforindiana.com. Thank you.
Thank you. And our first question concerns funding for education. Many voters and constituents are concerned about the level of funding for public education. We'll begin with Alex Sable. What would you do to propose in terms of dealing with issues such as teacher pay, school funding, school vouchers, as well as the overall setup for the schools in the state of Indiana?
I only have a minute to say all that? Yeah. I mean, listen, our schools are such a priority for me, and I think needs to be a priority for our state, especially publicly funded education to public schools. If you look around, our state is one of the lowest in teacher pay. We're the lowest in the surrounding states around us. And beyond that, our state has many teachers working 2 or 3 jobs. I went to Hobby Lobby the other day. I walked through the checkout line, and there's a woman standing there, and she told me that she's a teacher, and this is her second job besides the job she works at. And beyond that, we've seen declining graduation rates. In the last 5 years, Indiana's graduation rates in our 5 counties that represent our district, 4 out of the 5 have declined, and 1 stayed the same. We need to look at our system and take on a whole new view of what's possible here in education.
Thank you. Don Leahy, what do you propose in terms of dealing with school funding, teacher pay, and vouchers for schools?
As you know, this is a budget session coming up in 2021, along with a lot of other things. I would continue to do what Indiana has done in the past, and I've worked on this will be my 10th budget. Every budget that I voted for increased funding for K-12 education. That's over 50% of the budget. So it's a priority in Indiana. It has been a priority in Indiana. And all the budget that I've worked on or have been involved with, education funding was a priority. As far as where those dollars go, as the courts have said, parents make that decision of where those dollars go. Indiana has decided we fund students, we don't fund structures, we don't fund schools, buildings. We fund students at a tuition rate, and the parents can make those decisions of what they think is best for their children.
Alex Sable, 30 seconds rebuttal.
You know, when it comes to public education, I think it's a cornerstone of our country and of our democracy. And if we don't have public education public dollars going to public schools, it doesn't work. And we've seen our state spend more and more money on students with less and less results. And I'm committed to results. And I don't think that we've gotten what we need in public education. And Mr. Leahy, I hear you on your increasing funding, but public school teachers and public school educators give you a D rating when it comes to public education.
Mr. Leahy, your response.
Well, I guess I would only say that we have that discussion every budget about where the dollars go. Local school boards decide how that money is divided when the state gives lump sum dollars per student, tuition, and other forms of support. So it's up to the parents to make that decision, and we've supported that, and it has worked well for those folks that want to utilize that option.
Thank you. Our second question will begin with Don Leahy. It concerns Indiana's Rainy Day Fund. The state has had a certain amount of pride in keeping a large surplus for times when it's raining and there's a great need in the state. Is it raining now, or should Indiana continue to maintain that large surplus?
Well, as I assume everyone knows, the state revenues have declined significantly over the COVID issue, and revenues are very, very limited. The good thing about budgeting in a quote rainy day fund or a reserve is that currently we can continue, even though most agencies are going to be 15% cut from their last year's 2019 two-year budget. K-12 education will be able to be fully funded at 100% of what their budget was proposed and passed in the last session. in the 2019 session. So without that rainy day fund, that would not be possible. That's how I operate at home in our business. We don't spend every last dollar every time we have revenue. So it's very important that we maintain that. It's a safety that when we do have an issue that can't be controlled by the citizens.
Thank you. Alex Sable, should Indiana continue to maintain a large budget surplus, or is it raining?
It's raining, Chris. The surplus, I understand the need for a surplus, but what you want to do with a surplus is you want to make smart investments. And, you know, just like Mr. Leahy said, he saves some money aside. I do that too in business. But what you want to do with that money is then go and invest it in times where it makes sense. And now is the time. We have education issues going on in our state. We have a healthcare crisis going on in the world and our state. We need to take time and money and invest in healthcare. Healthcare is our way out of this. You know, if we want an economic exit, you know, and economic prosperity to come back here to our state, we have to get everyone taken care of when it comes to their health care. It's the only way we're going to get out of this.
Thank you. Don Leahy, 30 seconds rebuttal, follow-up?
Well, I guess I would add that it's not just K-12 education or education in general we talk about, because when we talk about what we do with that surplus or that rainy day fund, we've got other agencies, mental health organizations, mental health providers. We've got a Center for Disease Control has put out a lot of information on where other needs are in regards to health care also. So there's a lot of other things that we have to deal with.
Alex Sable.
I mean, I think the bottom line here is that we have 500,000 Hoosiers who are uninsured, and that was in 2018. And that was when times were good. Now, where are we? I don't know the numbers. I don't know if Mr. Leahy knows the numbers, but I can imagine that we have more and more people uninsured in the middle of a health crisis. That doesn't work, and we need to come up with a new vision for how healthcare works in this state. There are too many people to not have access to the healthcare they need.
Our third question will begin with Alex Sable. Of course, during the pandemic, there's been a huge financial downturn and negative impact on people because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the forced shutdowns. What types of initiatives would you support to address the recession or to help people recover financially in Indiana?
Yeah, well, I'll start by saying I think Indiana has a real opportunity to make some smart investments as a state for the public good. And I think the biggest one is healthcare. I think the next one, and I've talked a little bit about that already, I think the next one is Indiana has the opportunity to be the sustainable technology hub of the country. We can be leaders in wind, we can be leaders in solar energy, we can be leaders in agriculture sustainability practices and manufacturing sustainability practices. This is a huge opportunity, because if you look around right now, we're one of the worst polluted states in the country. 130 million tons of toxic waste get dumped into our environment through some of those groups I just mentioned, agriculture, manufacturing, and others, and ourselves. Like, we got to take responsibility for this, and we could be the hub, something the coast can't do, and we have Purdue in our backyard and all the resources to do it.
Thank you. Don Leahy, what types of initiatives would you support to address the ongoing recession and the financial recovery that's moving slowly in Indiana?
Well, with the pandemic, and we all know it's been handled several different ways around the country. I try to get as much information as I can. I'm very concerned about a lot of the data that is getting out that people are seeing. I'm not sure I trust a lot of that data. I think Indiana has to get back to work. The best solution to our revenue shortfall is get people back to work, get working, while still protecting the health and welfare of our students and our elderly and anyone else that has issues. I think we need to really look at the data that's coming out, look at that data, try to get, because I've told people, no matter what your position is on the pandemic, you can find an expert somewhere that says that's right. And so I think we just really need to look at how we address the data, get that correct information, and deal with those in a safe way.
Alex Sable, 30 seconds rebuttal.
Well, I'm not sure what other data we need besides what's coming out of the state already. If we can't rely on that, I don't know what we are supposed to be relying on. But with that said, I think what's most important here is that we have people feel comfortable. If people feel comfortable to go out of their homes and go out and go dining and go to work, then that's what's going to get us out of this. And that is a healthcare piece. We need masks, and we need the opportunity for people to go around and feel like they can go to a hospital if they need it, which would require health care for everyone here.
Thank you. Don Leahy, 30 seconds to follow up.
Well, I think what I like to do is compare what Indiana is doing and where we are compared to a lot of states. I have a couple of daughters on the East Coast, and I know we get frustrated with what's going on in a lot of the communities in Indiana. A lot of that is controlled by the local elected officials. But Indiana is far better off than a lot of the other states that I hear from and have children in those other states also.
Thank you. Our next question will begin with Don Leahy. Many voters have concerns about climate and the environment. We've had some local demonstrations and protests throughout the past year here in Greater Lafayette. So what specific proposals do you have to address those concerns about climate and environment in Indiana?
Well, I'm also concerned about some of the data that we get about climate change. And it's kind of appropriate currently because actually tomorrow, but when this gets broadcast, it'll probably be over with. But I'm chairing a committee that's looking into the carbon credit market, and we will be studying the possibility of having a program in the state of Indiana where that allows not just farmers but also forest owners, tree folks that own some forest land, to be able to capitalize on the carbon credit market, be able to utilize that in a way that would benefit not only their own operations but also the environment in the state of Indiana. So that'll be a big discussion here in the near future that we will be discussing, and whether or not Indiana puts a plan together. There's currently a plan at the federal level that's going to deal with that. We just need to decide if we're going to follow with the same kind of a plan.
Thank you. Alex Sable, what types of initiatives would you support regarding climate change and the environment?
Yeah, as I mentioned, I think our state has this unique opportunity to be a hub for this type of investment and technology because of Purdue in our backyard, because of our land, because of our agriculture, because of our manufacturing. We have this awesome opportunity to be a leader here. And Indiana, I love when Indiana's a leader. And I think we really have this great space where we can step into leadership when it comes to wind energy, when it comes to solar energy, and when it comes to, things to deal with some of the harm that our state is causing right now to our environment. We only get one home planet. This is the one we've got. We got to take care of it. We have to take care of it for our farmers. I just read a USDA report that said 20% decrease in crop yields because of rising temperatures. It's not going to work for our farmers. It's not going to work for us.
Don Leahy, 30 seconds to follow up.
Well, as I said before, you can find statistics and anything that can justify a position on about any item. So it's true. I visited the office or the department at Purdue University that's dealing with climate change. I think they will be testifying in our upcoming meeting, and I see a lot of information, some of it conflicting. So I think it's very important that we look at that information and decide if there are options that we can utilize here in Indiana.
Alex Sable.
Well, as your representative, I will talk to the experts, I will listen to the data, and I will make decisions based on that. And I think that that's what's necessary here when we look at climate change, because this is an issue affecting all of us, but more than that, it's an issue that there's data backing it up, and there's research backing up, and it's affecting everyone in our communities, and especially the most vulnerable in our communities.
Both of you have talked about data, and so this next question delves into that a little bit more. To what extent would you use data and science to help in your decision making? Can you cite an example where data changed your mind or helped you inform your decision on an issue? Alex Sabol.
Yes, I mean, one of the first calls I made when I decided to run for office was to call the Climate Change Research Center and have a conversation with their experts. When I wanted to know about education, I called one of the local principals at one of the schools in our district, and I got information that way. And I think that's, I'm young enough to know that I don't know everything. And so because of that, I want to talk to these experts. I want to talk to the people who know more than I do. And I think that that's something that's needed right now, especially in public service. We need to be talking to the people who know more than we do. We can't be making decisions without great data, without great information, and without great guidance. And I'm committed to being someone who makes decisions in those ways so we can have this new vision for our state where we have everything that we need and a path forward for the future.
Mr. Leahy, to what extent have you used science and data in the past to inform your decisions, and how would you continue doing that? Is there an example of how information like that informed your vote?
Well, that's a big part of what we do in the legislature. We get input from a multitude of agencies, constituents, departments, or any source that we can get information and data. So we've got that opportunity. We use that opportunity, especially important when we talk about funding and where that funding goes. The success from, for example, previous budgets, dollars that were spent. Just use education as an example of that. We look at that data. We find out where dollars are best spent, where dollars are getting the most bang for the buck, so to speak, and try to utilize that information in making future decisions. And I've done that continuously all the years I've been in the legislature, and we'll continue to do so. So it's an important part of what we do, and utilize as much of that information as possible.
Alex Sabol.
Well, I think the issue here is that Mr. Leahy, I hear you saying this about using data, but then I also hear you questioning the data that you say you're using. So I don't know what the stance is on data. And I know for me, I'm committed to being someone who listens. And I want to listen to you, the voters, and I want to listen to the experts. I want to listen to the educators, the parents, the administrators. I want to listen to the experts in health. And I want to use that to inform the best policy we can have for our state.
Don Leahy, 30 seconds to follow up.
Well, it's true. I get a lot of data from a lot of sources, and it's up to us as individuals to decide if that data is useful. It's up for us to decide which part of that data who has, let's say, proven or have made the best presentation of their information and their data. So those are some of the hard decisions you have to make as a legislator, and I trust as much as I can. I utilize all I can. I hear from constituents, so it's a very difficult decision sometimes.
Thank you both very much. The time has gone quickly. Good discussion, and thank you for your participation. We will move to closing statements now, and we will begin with Alex Sabol.
This is the most important election that many of us will ever vote in. I've spoken to many of you. We've spoken to thousands of voters throughout our campaign, and the future of our state is on the ballot. And I hope tonight that I gave you a clear view of what that future would look like with me as your next state representative. So just as I've helped business leaders create new visions for their organizations, I'm committed to creating a new vision for Indiana with a big future for everyone, where no one's left out. And tonight I'm asking for your support. I'm asking you to learn more about me, to ask me questions, to ask ways to get involved. And to do that, you can go to my website, alexforindiana.com. And I thank you graciously for giving your time and your attention and being an informed member of our electorate, because that's the cornerstone of our democracy. And may we do what it takes this election to move our great state forward for this and future generations. Thank you.
Thank you. Don Leahy, a minute for closing thoughts.
Well, it's true. I get a lot of data from a lot of sources, and it's up to us as individuals to decide if that data is useful. It's up for us to decide which part of that data who has, let's say, proven or have made the best presentation of their information and their data. So those are some of the hard decisions you have to make as a legislator, and I trust as much as I can. I utilize all that I can. I hear from constituents, so it's a very difficult decision sometimes.
We thank both candidates for participating and for giving information to help voters make an informed decision.
The 2020 Candidate Forum for the Indiana House of Representatives District 25 was presented by Star City Broadcasting and the League of Women Voters of Greater Lafayette. Thank you for watching.
The most influential talk radio voices of our time. Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Tony Katz, Dave Ramsey, and all things local with Lafayette Live. The voice of Greater Lafayette, The Patriot, 104.3 FM.
Z96.5 WAZY is your home for Purdue football. Join us for Purdue Game Day 2 hours before the kickoff of every Purdue game. And then it's the Boilermaker Sports Network pregame show 1 hour before kick. Purdue football on Z96.5 WAZY.
People from all across the greater Lafayette area were asked what TV stations and shows they watched. And one group of TV stations came out on top. Star City Broadcasting, ABC 35, NBC 16, Fox 16, and Me My TV. We'd like to say thank you for making us #1 in the greater Lafayette area. It makes us proud to say, this is home.